we have this misconception of surrender, that surrender is weak, that surrender means giving up, that surrender means waving the white flag, that surrender means being passive and sitting and doing nothing and having no motivation, that surrender means you sell everything, go to the Himalayas, wear white robes and, have a begging bowl, that surrender means you're going to be a victim, that you're going to be taken advantage of, that if you surrender, you won't manifest your goals, dreams, and desires, that if you surrender, you're going to get less in life. And I'm actually saying, what if through real surrender, if you understood what real authentic surrender was, you wouldn't get less in life, but you would actually get more than you could plan and imagine with your limiting mind, more than you could plan and imagine for yourself. And it's through surrender that you transcend your ego's human limitations. All of those great ones, they went beyond themselves. They surrendered themselves to life. And it was because they went beyond their own egos, beyond their own self, that life was able to manifest through them. Life was able to use them in a way that probably they could not have manifested on their own.
Now to welcome the author and my guest, Kute Blackson. Kute is a beloved international speaker, transformational teacher, visionary, and guide. He's the author of the national best-selling book, You.Are.The.One and the Magic of Surrender. He is widely considered the next generation leader in the field of personal development and has been featured on Larry King Now, Fox and Friends, Dr. Drew, and as well as Inc. magazine calls him the mindfulness guru Billionaires go-to for advice. Kute Blackson offers a fresh, bold look at spiritual awareness for a whole new generation. Born in Ghana, West Africa, Kute's multicultural upbringing as a child of a Japanese mother and a Ghanaian father has spanned over 4 different continents. His unique lineage lay the foundation for his approach to breaking down barriers and unlocking an individual's true gifts and greatness. Well, I'm so happy to welcome back on my show for the second time the amazing and inspiring Kute Blackson. Kute, you seriously are, I'm not joking when I say this, you are up there with Oprah to me. And Tony Robbins, which those two are like my top mentors. And I share this with everybody. I was sharing with my boyfriend the other day. I'm like, you have no idea. This Kute Blackson, he is so powerful. And the words you speak just really resonate and they speak volumes. And they're like, you just speak about some of the most important topics that everybody needs to learn more about. And that is how to live truly authentic, truly aligned, fully free, and just really connected deeply with your soul, not your ego self, and really how to lead your life with purpose, passion, and fulfillment. And that's my love language. So anyways, I just want to bow down to you because I really respect your work and your words, and they resonate deeply with me. And I know the audience agrees.
Thank you. Thank you. That really inspires me to know, because it's why I do what I do and why I kind of got into this in the first place. So it's a real joy and privilege to know that I've been a part of your life and growth in some way. So thank you.
Yes. And as we were talking about before I pressed record, how significant you have been a part of my journey, especially in the last year. So I know, so the last time you came on the show, it was to talk about your newest book, The Magic of Surrender. And I know this is reversed, but Magic of Surrender, this is your newest book and it's a New York Times bestselling. Is it New York Times bestseller?
It's a bestseller. Yeah, it's a bestseller.
And this is really one of the books I recommend the most to people today. Many people have read this book because I just like my stamp of approval of how profound it is. And I feel like it's a life-changing book. And I mean that with all sincerity. And especially I want to share of how much it's impacted my life personally in the last year. As I was mentioning to you, I got the news last year that my dog had lymphoma, cancer, and my dog, my most loving companion. He was my closest, like my best friend, my deepest companion and love of my life. And to hear he had cancer was obviously very heart-wrenching. And of course, we went through the whole process to give him the chemo and do everything we could. But really, what we needed to do is surrender to the inevitable that's going to happen. And that's very hard. And we're going to go really much more deeper into this idea of surrendering and really what it means and why it's so critical for everybody to understand. But really, what you taught me in the last episode, you really talked deeply about grieving and the importance of feeling all your feelings and allowing it to move through you and to fully experience it so it can dissolve.
Yep.
And that message alone just was really profound to me. It really stuck out in this time because I think so many of us try to suppress our feelings. We don't fully feel them because we don't want to be in deep sadness or depression. So we avoid it. And I want people to really, really hear the importance of that, because your message for me when he did pass in Christmas, I heard your voice that I must feel everything. I must allow it to all move through me. I'm not going to deny it. I'm not going to rush the process. I'm going to let everything be what it's going to be and feel it. And I noticed everything. Like I noticed the moving into the stages of grief. And the hardest stage, of course, is going from acceptance to surrender, accepting the reality that he's no longer here and whatnot. So I know a lot of people have experienced grief in some part of their life. They've had deep loss, and loss could be a loving relationship. It could be, unfortunately, a losing of a life. During COVID, a lot of people lost people close to them or knew somebody possibly that passed. So anyways, where I'm going with that is, number one, to thank you again, because how much that taught me how to grieve, and I didn't know how to grieve and why it was so critical. So since we're on that subject, I might as well start with that and really crystallize the importance of fully grieving. Again, some of the things, since you were previously on the episode to talk about surrender and your newest book, I know we might touch on some topics that have been in the previous episode, but that just means the importance of the message. So regardless, the old episode will be in the show notes. The book will be in the show notes. Also, he has his newest paperback coming out soon, which we're going to share everything about that. But let's just talk about grief. Let's just go deep. Let's just share the importance of why we must grieve and really what the process is and the importance of moving through it.
Yeah, I mean, there is no authentic surrender without grieving. Grieving is the portal to surrender. And I think in the phases of, let's say, surrendering, and we can talk a bit about the phases, most people tend to skip over grieving. Most people tend to avoid grieving. Most people tend to deny the grieving. And so we maybe finally get to a place of acceptance, like, okay, it is what it is, but I'm still hurt. It is what it is, but I'm still carrying pain from the betrayal. It is what it is, but I'm still stuck in anger. And what we tend to do is hold on, suppress, deny, distract ourselves from the deeper level of feeling. And so there's a part of us that isn't able to fully move to that next stage of truly letting go so that we can release and open and step into the new. And so the degree to which we deny the grieving, the degree to which we suppress the grieving, avoid the grieving, is also the degree to which we deny and limit our capacity to feel joy. We actually limit our capacity to open to the ecstasy and the bliss and the good feeling when we deny the so-called grief. And so to me, there is no such thing as a good feeling or a bad feeling. But in our culture today, we haven't been taught how to feel. We've been taught to suppress and deny and disconnect and to not feel from the moment we're children. Like, we start crying and we're taught, boys don't cry, girls don't, you shouldn't feel that way, suck it up, toughen up. And so from a very young age, we've been conditioned to not feel our feelings. We've been conditioned to suppress our feelings in order to function and survive. As children, just when we're born, we incarnate into this human experience, these wide open beings, and we're in touch with the free feeling energy of our emotions. Feelings are just energy. Feelings are just energy in motion, not good, bad, positive, or negative. They're just kind of information. They're just feedback. And so as children, we're these wide open, feeling sensitive, in tune, intuitive beings, and then we incarnate into this human experience. And as we incarnate into this human experience, a couple of things happen that begin to shape our relationship with our feeling capacity. We incarnate into this human experience, we meet our parents, and we're born into a kind of preset framework of conditioning, maybe ancestral, karmic, maybe our parents were fighting all the time, maybe they weren't emotionally present, maybe they didn't know how to meet our needs, they weren't emotionally in tune with what we needed, and so certain needs weren't met. Maybe there was mental health issues, maybe there was addictions, maybe they were fighting all the time, maybe there was abuse, physical, mental, emotional, sexual abuse. And so as these sensitive beings that were really in tune with feeling and our feeling nature, because we didn't have these defense mechanisms, we learned often unconsciously to shut down, disconnect, and not feel. Wow, dad is screaming all the time. Mom and dad are fighting all the time. This is painful. This is really hurt. This really hurts. I feel really sad. And that doesn't feel good. It's so painful. And I don't know, and I don't necessarily have the capacity to know how to deal with the feeling and the pain. So shut down, disconnect, not feel. And we start erecting all sorts of defense mechanisms to shut down, disconnect, not feel, and ultimately function, cope, and survive. And so we erect walls around our feeling capacity. We erect walls around our capacity to feel the pain, but it's a survival mechanism. There's a positive intention there. And then we go through our entire life without access to a part of ourselves. And the structure, or should I say the defense mechanism that we learn to create as a way of being in the world to not feel that pain is created now in such a way that we go through life and it's created to protect ourselves from ever feeling that pain again. Mm-hmm. And so we go through life. And so when there's pain, when there's grief, when there's heartbreak, that defense mechanism that we created when we were 5, when we were 7, when we were 8 is so strong with good intention, but it's part of what limits our capacity to go into the grief, to go into the pain, to go into the sadness. And so the defense mechanisms that we create, I always say, there's a beautiful intention, there's a positive intention, but it ends up limiting our ability to truly feel our feelings fully. And in doing so, that's part of why we often stay stuck. And that's part of why we often keep attracting and recreating and attracting the same kinds of situations, the same kinds of dynamic, the same sorts of people as an unconscious impulse to try to complete the feeling that wasn't felt when we were children. It's an unconscious impulse to healing, so we keep attracting it. And so ultimately, if you don't deal with your feeling, it will eventually deal with you. If you don't feel your feelings, and the feelings that you don't feel fully and truly and authentically will at some point express in unhealthy, toxic ways, either in the form of depression, either in the form of, sort of mental, issues, either in the form of physical pain in some way, a momentary physical pain, backache, shoulder ache, eye infection, either in the form of let's say, a more serious ongoing dis-ease, either in the form of like a stuckness in the flow of life, or in the form where you begin to attract to yourself unconsciously, but you start resonating and attracting to yourself people, individuals in your relationships that will reflect and project to you the grief, the feeling, the pain that you are not consciously dealing with. That feeling starts to be projected out there into the world, and you'll start noticing that you begin attracting people that reflect your unexpressed, disowned feeling. And so one of the reasons that or a few of the reasons that we tend to avoid grief and we tend to avoid going into that place is because we haven't been taught to feel that feeling. You know, even in media, if you switch on the television as children, we're taught like, hey, you feel sadness, you feel pain, you feel grief, you feel heartbreak, you feel that depth of feeling. Don't feel it, to pop this pill. Don't feel it, drink this drink. Don't feel it, buy this thing. Whatever it is, just don't feel it. Here's the solution. And we're constantly sold a strategy and a methodology to basically not feel our feeling. And every addiction in and of itself is not so much about the addiction, it's a way to avoid feeling the feeling, or it's a way to get another feeling. And so there isn't a context where we're necessarily taught to feel our feelings. So there's this perhaps perception or belief that if I feel my feelings fully, and this is perhaps the fear, if I feel my feeling fully, then it will never end. There'll be no end to it. If I feel the grief, in this case fully, then it will overwhelm me. If I feel it fully, it will break me. It will destroy me. It will be too much for me. I don't have the capacity to feel it fully and stay sane, you know. Or sometimes we suppress that grief also as a kind of unconscious way to hold on. Like, for instance, if I truly let myself grieve, which is an acceptance that my loved one is gone. If I truly let myself grieve, I have to accept that my mother, my father, my cat, my dog, my loved one is truly gone. They're not coming back. And if I really accept that and I really grieve that, then it's real. And so sometimes the denial of the grief, the not feeling the grief, becomes an unconscious way to hold on to that possibility that it hasn't really happened. Like, I'm not going to really grieve the end of this relationship, because if I don't grieve it, then maybe there's hope. Then maybe I don't have to acknowledge that it's over for real, and I can still live in the hope. And so grief becomes a way to try to hold on to what was. Like, if I grieve my mother's death, then I'm going to have to acknowledge that she's gone. But if I don't grieve it, then maybe I don't have to acknowledge that she's really, really gone. And so this is one of the reasons why we don't fully acknowledge the grieving or that sadness, because the grieving is the portal to letting go. And if I don't grieve, then maybe I don't have to let go. I can always have a piece of her and live in that fantasy. And so one of the other reasons I've seen that we don't grieve fully or allow ourselves is a spiritual bypass. And we do this thing called spiritual bypass, where we use the spiritual principles as a way to not feel our feelings, like everything is light, everything is good, everything is God. Or I just want to stay in the law of attraction. I just want to stay in a high frequency, in a high vibration. Grief is not a high vibration. So I want to stay in this high frequency, high vibration, so that I can, attract positivity. But we don't realize that you can do the most amazing, pineal gland activation meditation and the blue light meditation, and you have this high experience. But what I have found is, since we are embodied in this human, physical, three-dimensional form, no matter how high you go, you will only be able to sustain the height of your bliss, the height of your positive experience, to the degree that you have resolved and dealt with the lower, the shadow, the grief, the heavier, the darker experience. So you will always tend to gravitate back down eventually to the set point of what you haven't dealt with. And so in an effort to sort of be in this high law of attraction vibration, and if you don't deal with the grief because you're so pushing yourself, pumping yourself up to be positive, eventually you'll gravitate back to the unresolved grief. And so even if you don't deal with the grief, it will deal with you at some point. If you don't deal with the grief, you're going to be forced to deal with it, because that's an energy and vibration that you will manifest in your experiences and in your relationships as a way to face and deal with. And so we first have to understand that no good or bad feelings we also need to understand that no feelings are permanent. We think they're permanent, but no feelings are permanent. Every feeling has a natural cycle. Every feeling has a natural cycle, and feelings sometimes have layers and layers and layers. And so with regards to grief, when we feel the grief, the first layer of grief, sometimes people say, but I felt the grief and there's more. It's natural that there's more because there's another layer and there's another layer and there's another layer. And sometimes people start getting scared of like, it's never going to end. But grief doesn't happen all at once. It happens in stages. It happens in layers. And when we can have an understanding and relationship with the feeling and the grieving process, then we don't have to get freaked out, and we can allow the layers and the stages. So you might feel a layer of grief, and then that's gone, and then you go into your day, there's a moment of openness and expansion, and then there's another moment of contraction into the grief for a moment, and then another layer of expansion. And sometimes people say, well, but I was fine, and now I heard a song and I got triggered, and I remembered my dog, I remembered my mother, I remembered my ex, and all the feelings of grief came out. That's a natural cycle. And so it's so important that we don't resist the grief. One of the things that I found that we do when an event that's painful happens and grieving is there, is we tend to distract ourselves, and we numb it away, drink it away, sex it away, drug it away, social media away, whatever it is to not feel it, not realizing that we're just keeping ourselves stuck. The quickest way through heartbreak, the quickest way through pain, the quickest way through grieving is to feel it fully with awareness and go through it. Feeling the grief, feeling any feeling, feeling the grief is not to wallow in it. There's a big difference. It's not to wallow in it and feel like a victim. It is with full awareness to embrace and feel the feeling fully. Sometimes, and I think we may have talked about this in the last episode, but sometimes people think that they're feeling their feelings. And they say, well, Eric, I've been feeling this forever and it doesn't go. The challenge is many times people are thinking about their feeling, not truly feeling their feeling. And that's a huge distinction. Thinking about the feeling. What's wrong with me for feeling this? Why does it feel this way? Why do I feel this way? And we're analyzing the feeling. Analyzing and thinking about the feeling is not truly feeling the feeling. And even though we think we're feeling the feeling, we will end up staying stuck. To truly feel the feeling is where the healing and the letting go and the unraveling and the releasing and the healing happens. When we truly just surrender to being with the experience, being with the feeling without judgment. What that looks like more tangibly might be, take the label off of the feeling. So, okay, you have this grief feeling. And then rather than having a preconceived idea, this is good, this is bad, I should feel this, I shouldn't feel this, what's wrong with me for feeling this? Just notice the sensation of that feeling in your body. No name, no story. Drop the why, drop the story about what happened and what didn't happen. And just because the story often takes us away from just being with the experience, to truly experience the feeling. And so when you drop that, drop the name, don't even call it grief, and just notice the sensation of that grief in your body as an energy, as a sensation. Every feeling has a sensation. And when we can just be with the energy of the grief and notice the feeling, it has a cycle. And when you be with that fully, without resistance, without judgment, without trying to get rid of it, without trying to, destroy it, without trying to do anything, but just being with it and notice what happens, you'll begin to notice that it has a cycle. And when you be with it fully, that grieving has a cycle, 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 and then that sensation starts to move. No sensation just stays and lasts forever when we're fully with it. When we're resisting it or when we're avoiding it, then things stay stuck. When we resist that negative feeling, it stays stuck longer. But also simultaneously, similarly, when we try to hold on to the positive feeling, like, oh, I feel good, now I have to keep this feeling forever, we tend to get rid of it in the attachment. And so just to be with the sensation fully in your body, you'll start noticing what happens when you're just with that sensation. You'll often find it starts to move and it starts to move and it starts to shift. And maybe there'll be physical sensations, physical movement. heat in your body, temperature change. There might be tears. Then again, no story about they did this, they did that, just being with the sensation. And there might be tears, there might be emotion, and a layer gets released. There's opening. And that's kind of how we get to experience the feeling through the sensation, through your body. And that's how layers get released. You know, when I think I wrote a bit about this in the Magic of Surrender book, but I had the experience where my mother passed away. And when she passed away, I really endeavored to let myself feel the grief fully, you know, on an intellectual level, and even on a soul level. I knew that she was eternal. I knew that she wasn't really dead, that her soul was beyond death, beyond birth. I knew that, I felt that, I believed that. And because we exist on a 3D human personality level, it's so important that it's through the feelings that we get to truly integrate all parts of ourselves and the human level rather than a spiritual bypass. So I really allowed myself to feel the human level grief fully. And the key thing is to feel it without attachment, to also realize that you are not the feeling. You are not the grief. And when we realize that we are not the grief, then we don't have to hold on, we don't have to resist, we don't have to attach it, we can let it move through. And so I just had this moment when my mother passed away of just really allowing myself to feel the grief so fully. And there were waves of sadness, there were waves of grieving. And I think many times the degree to which we feel grief is also the degree to which we love. You know, and so to deny the grief is to deny the love. And so when I really just let myself feel the grief, there were moments of tears, there were moments of emotion, there were moments of just deep feeling. But when I remember when I felt the grief, it was like the shape of my heart, the current limit or shape of my heart broke open. It was like my heart broke open in the grieving to a new size, to a new dimension. And then as I'd feel that, and then there was another wave of grieving and another wave of tears, another wave of emotion. It was like then the current shape of my heart broke open again. So it was through the grief. The grieving is what broke my heart open to a bigger capacity and a bigger dimension of ability to love and feel love and express love. And so I think grief, there are gifts in our grieving, but what's important to know, grieving doesn't last forever. And I think when we can really just relax in that knowing of, okay, it won't last forever. It might feel that way, but it won't. Avoiding the grieving, then we end up staying stuck and lost forever. So I think it's so important that we allow ourselves to grieve, because then we get to release and then we get to let go. And you know, to truly surrender requires grieving, to truly surrender, because, you know, surrender is the open-hearted participation in the process of life. And to surrender is a death. It might be a death of one's youth, a death of a stage of one's life, a death of an identity, a death of an old story you've been telling yourself, a death of a job, a death of a way of being, a death of a relationship, a death of a beloved pet, a death of whatever it is. But surrender is a death of an idea, a death of a dream, a death of who you thought you were going to be, and that requires a letting go. And it's only through grieving that death, and not just staying stuck in the intellect, but fully grieving that death, that your body and your cells and your energetic being and your physicality can also relax and open and let go, and then fully open to the new. So I think there are great gifts in the grieving and gifts in letting go. And when we fully, for instance, if a relationship ends, a lot of people just jump into a new relationship and they don't fully grieve. So they're in a relationship, it ends, we're hurt, we jump into a new relationship. To me, that's the worst thing we can do. Jump into a new relationship, because now there's a part of your heart that is still grieving. So there's a part of your heart that isn't fully open, that perhaps you don't have complete access to yet. You jump into a relationship, and now a new relationship, and now you only have access to, let's say, 65% of your full love healing capacity. And now you're not fully able to like express all of yourself in the way that you want. So you're in this new relationship, and guess what? Maybe that ends now. So now there's more grieving. So now you only have access to 40% of your heart. And then you end up meeting someone else and jumping into a new relationship with 40%. And then the cycle continues. And we wonder, why am I in this loop, and why am I in this cycle? And so when we really allow ourselves to grieve, we regain access to a lost part of ourselves. And in regaining access to that lost part of ourselves, we have more of ourselves available to embrace life and feel everything.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, Kute, I'm so thankful you really crystallized the importance of grief, and everything you shared, I so resonate with, because again, you were my teacher at the time I needed you. And I witnessed all the stages, and it was very interesting because when you witness it and you feel it, you notice exactly as you're saying, it will go in stages, and you'll be like, I thought I fully grieved. And then it will have another wave. And also I really resonate with your heart. I felt like my heart was opening more as well. And I remember, because you were talking about people go from relationship to relationship and not fully grieve. People do that with pets too. They'll get a new pet and they won't fully grieve the loss. And I remember saying to myself, I won't get a new dog because I'm going to get another dog, and that's coming soon, but I'm not. But I remind myself, like, I need to fully grieve the loss of my beloved Chance and losing him, and how much that impacted me, and being able to release that love for him so I can love another dog fully for the dog that I'm getting. And so, like I said, I thank you, because I wouldn't have this awareness without your teachings, that what I learned from interviewing you the last time and reading your book, your phenomenal book. So everything you shared, I think people could really, if you gain the awareness of possibly where you have not fully healed, now this is your permission to go fully in it, and go within that fear, and notice like what is not fully healed, because that's just going to expand the more light that's been dimmed from, this trauma or sadness or whatever. So thank you for crystallizing that. Super important.
I think it's great that people ask themselves what you're asking, which is, what have I not fully grieved yet? Because many times people will live life and they're like, I just don't feel myself. I don't know why. I just don't feel happy, and I don't know why. I don't feel excited about life, and I'm not really sure why, because nothing has happened really in the last year or two, and it seems like nothing has happened. We just don't realize that perhaps we're carrying dead energy, dead unresolved grief from the past, layer upon layer inside of us. And so now we don't have access to the full aliveness and the full joy and the full innocence. And we're not sure why, because it seems like, well, everything is fine. We're just not aware that we haven't allowed ourselves to grieve that, and that dead energy is now blocking our capacity to feel excited, to feel fully alive. And so, I think everyone can sit with, like, what have I not grieved? What do I need to give myself permission to grieve, and not intellectualize it, like, I'm okay, I'm fine, I'm strong, and it's like, allowing yourself to grieve doesn't mean you're weak. It actually requires a tremendous courage and a tremendous strength. And when you do that, you'll find many things start opening up and freeing, and life begins flowing more naturally again. And so one thing that really helped me was, and grief doesn't have to mean you just wallow in the grief for 8-10 hours a day, walk around moping around, at work, like, what are you doing? I'm grieving. It might just mean, on a daily basis. For me, when my mother passed away, I would take some evenings for like the first month. I would take, an hour, couple of hours, sometimes in the evening, to give myself full permission to grieve. It was just full. That was my grief time. It doesn't mean I didn't feel grief in the other moments of the day, but during that grief time, it was full permission to journal, to cry, to feel, to move, to whatever needed to happen. But this was the time where I didn't have to hold anything together, and it was so liberating and free. And I just want people to know, no feeling lasts forever. The grief will pass, even in the moments where you feel like it will never end. It will. And this, in terms of the stages, sometimes we go through different stages where first, stage one, we're in denial, right? And then like, no, I don't feel this. I don't feel anything. This is not happening. Then we start moving into a stage of, we start resisting it. Then we start negotiating. Well, maybe if I don't acknowledge this and I don't feel it, then we move into acceptance. That's what we talked about. Then we move into the grieving. And then we move into the surrender, true surrender. And then, one thing that also can help the grieving is focusing on, so once we feel the feeling, is focusing on the gratitude for the experience, the gratitude for the experience with your dog, the gratitude for the fact I had my mother all of these years. Some people lose their parents at age 15, age 20. I had my mother for decades, and all of the amazing experiences I had, even in the last year when my mother was dying, I got to spend a year with her. Some people, their parents just get hit by a bus and it's over, and they don't even get to have that closure. So I started to focus on the gratitude from the experience with my mother and with the person. So focus on the gratitude. Focus also on the lessons and the learning from that experience. There were so many lessons and learnings, because I think we are souls. We incarnate into this human experience to learn, to grow, to evolve. And life is the curriculum for our soul's growth and evolution. And so when we also then focus on what was the learning, what was my soul seeking to learn from my dog? What was my soul? What was the karma? What was my soul seeking to learn? And then you might begin to realize, wow, I learned what I needed to learn. And if life is a school and life is a classroom for our soul's evolution, sometimes we graduate and the classroom's over. I really realized that my mother graduated, and her mission in this life, which was, I think, partly to give birth to me and to raise a son, and amongst other things. But when I really looked at her life, I realized she was complete. Her journey, her evolution was complete. And so I think when we're complete in this lifetime, when we're complete in this soul evolutionary experience, we're done. And perhaps death, we look at death as a limit, but what if death, we could also start seeing death as a graduation. And for instance, when you graduate from high school, maybe we're going to miss our friends, but there is an excitement, there is a celebration, there's a congratulation, like congratulations, you graduated from high school. So when we start seeing life through the soul perspective, that we incarnate to learn lessons, and perhaps when we've learned those lessons, we're complete. And completion might be a graduation, and part of that graduation may look like a death. When that mission, when that vision, when that the lessons are over, then I think that might start shifting our relationship. That gives us some space to be able to let go. And so when I saw my mother was completing her classroom in this lifetime, it really opened things up as well. So the gratitude, learning the lessons, acknowledging and looking at life through the soul perspective and seeing life as a classroom, I think really helps that grieving process.
Absolutely. I feel the same thing. Again, I learned so much through the death of my dog, and it's a blessing because it's opened me up to more love and more possibility in it. I've learned a lot from it, and I learned powerful lessons. Like one of the most recent powerful lessons was from that. So there's so much to be gained if we have that awareness of, asking ourselves these important questions, like, what can I learn from this? What am I grateful for? What, how blessed am I to have so much time with this person, yada, yada. I think it's so important to recognize these things, of course. So moving in from, so again, thank you so much for talking about grief, because I think grief is so important to, it's a process of surrendering, right? It's part of it, because surrendering is you are grieving something because you're releasing that control and attachment to something that you really don't have control of. So I would love if you could kind of talk into, why did you feel so compelled to talk about the magic of surrender, and why is surrender so important for people to understand? Because I know there's so many go-getters, there's so many ambitious people listening to this episode. And we know we want to manifest all those things in our life. And I know you talk a lot about manifestation, and part of manifesting is surrendering. But I think those people that are go-getters, hard driven, I'm going to get this done, I'm going to, go after my goals. They have a hard time
surrendering.
Well, having this different perspective of surrendering. So if you could kind of.
Good question. In terms of, like you said, why did I feel compelled? Because my mother passed away. And so if she didn't pass away, this book probably wouldn't be, to be honest. I may have written another book and it would have been something else, but because it took me on an unexpected journey. And even when she passed away, The Magic of Surrender was not the book I thought I was going to write. I actually had my own intentions of the book I thought it should be. And I had a poster board, I had a whiteboard full of ideas. And you know that feeling where you're trying to make something be and fit something into something that it's not. And nothing quite resonated. Nothing lit my soul on fire authentically. And I came up with all these great titles, all these great books I thought would sell, books I thought my audience would want, all the things we're taught to do in marketing kind of 101, right. Like, product market fit, and nothing felt true and authentic and lit me on fire, and nothing felt in my integrity. And the only word that really stood out for me was the word surrender. That was it. And when I saw that, I knew I resisted it at first, but I knew that this was the book that I was destined to write. This was the book that was seeking to be written, not just the book that I wanted to write. This was the book that was seeking to be written. The book had a soul of its own, and my job was to surrender to the energy of the book that was seeking to be written. And the more I was able to do that, the more things flow. And I'm really excited about surrender because I look back at my mother and my father and my entire upbringing, which I think we talked about in the first episode. Yeah. But I look back at all of that and I realized all of that really prepared me to write this book. Like this was the message that I was designed to write. And so, yeah, I think in our culture today, I'm excited about surrender because I feel as though surrender is the most powerful thing that we can do as human beings, especially for those go-getters listening. This is for you. Surrender is the superpower. Surrender is the hack to your greatness. Surrender is the key to your greatness, the key to your next level. Surrender is the real secret to manifestation. If you talk about being a go-getter, there were no greater go-getters than Jesus, than Buddha, than Mother Teresa, than Gandhi. Who's a more go-getter than Muhammad Ali, than Bruce Lee, than Bob Marley, than Martin Luther King? These were truly, Elon Musk. I mean, talk about a man who has surrendered, like him or hate him. I can tell you how he surrendered. And so Oprah, they all surrendered at some point. And so all of the truly great ones, I'm not talking about, so for people that are concerned, like, oh, I'm going to not be a go-getter, I'm going to lose motivation. These people moved the world. These people moved the planet, that even when they died, people like Bruce Lee and Muhammad Ali and Mandela, they're still impacting humanity. That's like real go-getting with a capital G, another level of go-getting. And so what I'm proposing is we have this misconception of surrender, that surrender is weak, that surrender means giving up, that surrender means waving the white flag, that surrender means being passive and sitting and doing nothing and having no motivation, that surrender means you sell everything, go to the Himalayas, wear white robes and have a begging bowl, that surrender means you're going to be a victim, that you're going to be taken advantage of, that if you surrender, you won't manifest your goals, dreams, and desires, that if you surrender, you're going to get less in life. And I'm actually saying, what if through real surrender, if you understood what real authentic surrender was, you wouldn't get less in life, but you would actually get more than you could plan and imagine with your limiting mind, more than you could plan and imagine for yourself. And it's through surrender that you transcend your ego's human limitations. All of those great ones, they went beyond themselves. They surrendered themselves to life. And it was because they went beyond their own egos, beyond their own self, that life was able to manifest through them. Life was able to use them in a way that probably they could not have manifested on their own. And so there's the, I think for the longest time, we've lived in an ego-based model. And as go-getters, I've been there, we lived in the ego-based model. We think we know what we want. We get clear. This is what I want to this is what I want for myself. But we don't really ask the question, who is this I? The I itself that is driven to manifest is in and of itself conditioned and limited to the past, to past experiences. So whatever we manifest from the ego, whatever we manifest from the ego-based model is going to be limited. Look, I will acknowledge that you can manifest from the mind. You can manifest from the level of the ego. You can manifest as a go-getter, but it will often be limited in some way. And in so many ways, we don't realize that with our conscious mental awareness, we are putting limits on life. You might get everything that you thought you wanted, only to realize that what you thought you wanted was not what you really wanted. It was just what you thought you wanted based on who you thought you were. And sometimes we really want something and we really think we want it. And when we get it, we realize, is this it? And we don't even realize that the mind that we have worshipped as a culture, the ego mind that we are using to manifest and make shit happen, isn't able to see the infinite possibilities of life. We get so attached to a certain outcome. We get so attached to a certain goal. We get so attached to a certain person. We get so attached to a certain way of something happening, of what we think we want, that we don't realize that perhaps the universe is seeking to give us and manifest so much more that we're not even able to imagine for ourselves. We're not able to see. Like, look at Nelson Mandela. Spent 27 years, I think 27 years in prison. Should he have not spent 27 years in prison? Should he have made a different reality happen? What if he didn't spend 27 years in prison? Would he have become the Mandela that we knew? Would he have cultivated the vision, the humility, the compassion, the thinking, the soul force, so that when he came out, he would be capable of moving a culture with that level of energy and focus? Should he have not? And so sometimes what we think we want is limited and we don't even realize it. And so surrender is taking the limits off of life and asking a different question. The question that I'm inviting the go-getters and everyone to ask is not, what do I want? It's a limited question. It's a finite game. I'm inviting everyone to truly take the limits off of life and play an infinite game and ask the question, what is it that life wants to manifest through me? Life. What is it that life wants to express through me? What is it that life wants to podcast through me, to create through me, to write through me? What is the deepest impulse of my soul that wants to express through me? And to truly attune to that, align to that, feel that, and allow the bigness of that to express, which we're not able to see fully. And when we do that, that's when life uses us. That's when we are truly available and open to the infinite possibilities. And that's when magic happens. And so magic isn't like a hocus pocus thing, right? Magic is not a David Copperfield thing. Magic is that result that is beyond our human capacity to imagine. It's the Mandela level, it's the Mother Teresa level, it's the Gandhi level. To me, all of these people were human beings that dared to surrender. And in that surrender, they tapped into another dimension of potential, of life's potential that expressed through them, and miracles happen. To me, this is magic. And so I tell people, do you want to live a good life or a great life? Do you want to live a good life, which is great? Or you want to live a Mandela, a Gandhi, a Buddha, a Jesus, a Bruce Lee life, a life that is beyond what you can imagine for yourself, because then it's no longer limited to your past, to your conditioning, to your identity, to your ego. It's coming from your soul. And to me, that is where the magic happens. And so many of us, we want the magic. Like, yeah, I want the magic, but we don't want to surrender. We want to hold on to the old. But the next level of your life, all the go-getters out there, the next level of your life requires the next level of you. The next level of you requires that you let go of what is no longer aligned, what is no longer working, what is no longer vibrational match. But often as human beings, in our paradigm of control, we tend to hold on to the old out of safety, out of comfort, out of familiarity. But we don't realize that we're just keeping ourselves stuck, and we end up limiting our manifestation in the holding on to what's no longer vibrational mesh. So to surrender means letting go of control, or I should say letting go of the illusion of control. Right. If we look at the last couple of years, control is the master addiction, and we think we're in control, but I think the last couple of years, right, have been showing us maybe we're not as in control as we thought. And so it's to let go of the illusion of control. It's to stop trying to force things to be something that they're not, and to try to manipulate life to fit a limited idea. Is to give up the idea of who we think we should be and how we think our life should be. And so many of us, we end up in trying to force life, but forcing something to be something that isn't doesn't make it so. And so when we take the limits off of life, in truly surrendering, we're available, we're open, we are curious. That availability is the formula for miracles. So if you want more magic, you got to surrender. The degree of magic you want to experience means the degree of surrender you want to experience. It means the degree of surrender that we need to open to and cultivate. And so surrender doesn't mean, for the go-getters, it doesn't mean sitting there doing nothing. It doesn't mean passivity. It doesn't mean sitting there and just saying, well, I'm just waiting. And what do you do? I'm just surrendering. No, that's laziness. That's just living. That's just procrastinating. Look at Jesus, Buddha, Gandhi, Mother Teresa, Mandela. They worked harder than you and I combined. They worked 20 hours a day. And so surrendering is to feel the deepest truth of your soul, the deepest truth that perhaps you've been denying, that nudging that says, you know what? You need to leave this business. You're playing too small. That deepest intuition that says, you know what? You need to write that book. The book you're writing is playing it safe. You need to write that book. You need to start that thing. You need to start speaking about that. And so many of us, we feel the deepest impulse of life, but we're afraid. And so that resistance, you need to invent that product. You need to go to that country. You need to move to a different place. Whatever that deeper impulse is, that next level, surrender is to surrender to that deepest impulse. And then align your actions and your thinking and your visualizations and your money and your strategy and your marketing and your resources around what's true, to basically go where it's scary. The next level of your life will be a bit scary because it will require that you become who you haven't before, and it will require that you go where you haven't before, and it will require that you tap into a part of yourself that you previously haven't had access to. So yes, it's going to be scary, maybe a little terrifying. That's growth, that's evolution. And so to surrender means going in that direction, giving 100%, giving everything you've got. As a go-getter, give everything. But what you're giving everything to now, and what you're acting on, is aligned, is true, is not just like what social media has taught you to do or what your parents taught you to do. It's what your soul is guiding you to do. So now you work 20 hours, but what you're working 20 hours towards is what's in alignment with your soul. And as you work and as you go get what's authentic, let's say, the key of surrender is to not be attached to the outcome. When you're not attached to it, you give 100%. You're not attached to the outcome. You're not attached to the goal. Then you're surrendered. Then you're open to life showing you. You're open to the course corrections of life. Sometimes we get so attached to what we think the goal is, but sometimes the goal that we think it is not the goal. It's just a necessary puzzle piece. It's the necessary pathway. It's the necessary puzzle piece that the journey that we need to go on in order to grow and evolve, and the lessons we need to learn so that we can be prepared for our true purpose. So give everything, take action fully with what's authentic and aligned, but don't get attached to the outcome, because then you're open to life showing you a different way. Maybe it pivots you to the right, maybe it pivots you to the left, maybe it takes you somewhere else. Maybe the only reason you meant to go there was not where you thought, but to meet a business partner, or to come in contact with someone that says something that gives you your next multi-million-dollar business idea. Who knows? And so just surrender is to live in that openness, and not think you know why something is, and not try to put a meaning on everything, but live like a child. A child is innocent, a child is available, a child is open. Then we're able to let life, surrender is to let life show you.
Ugh, I could listen to you all day. No, I mean that. But, you talk about, I remember in the book, you share so many experiences of yours and your process of surrendering. And I remember there was the one think in the book how you were saying when you decided you're just going to travel where you're directed to go. And I know you speak a lot about alignment. And I think it's really important to be able to connect to your soul's alignment. But I think there's so many people that don't even know what that looks like or feels like or anything of that sort. And I know you kind of talked about these important questions we should ask ourselves, like, what lies am I telling myself? Who am I? Like, what's this identity I'm attached to, this past that has formed this belief that this is the way I should go? And I think you share those important questions that we should ask ourselves. And then also you share in the book that if you don't feel this internal alignment, that pause, be still, and wait. And that doesn't mean non-action. It's just noticing and being aware of what actually, touches your soul. So how does somebody really understand or grasp that if they don't have this? Because I know you're very in touch with your intuition. That's proven in this book, but some people don't feel that way because they're attached to things,
Yeah, I think that's why it's so important to not be attached. What's important is we create the stillness and the spaces in our life to be able to listen, because sometimes we're so busy. But if you really be still, you'll start noticing that life has a flow. Life itself has a sense of a flow, and you'll start feeling that flow, and you'll start getting in tune with that flow. And so one thing that I found helps opening to one's intuition is, see, we all have that intuitive knowing. There's a part of us that knows everything. We know. We sometimes pretend we don't know. We sometimes confuse ourselves that we're confused, but we really do. Like, there's a part of us that knows everything, because at the deepest level, we are everything. So we know. And so I think what's important is when we feel that knowing, we feel that nudging, sometimes one's guidance, one's intuition is the unconditioned arising of our knowing that's coming from an unconditioned place beyond the mind. It doesn't always happen as like a loud siren bell. Sometimes it's gentle. Sometimes it's just a gentle sensation, nudging, a whisper, and it can be, often it's so subtle and quiet, we're just not paying attention. And so when we just start paying attention to the sensations in the body and the feeling and that something, you start feeling like, just kind of go over this direction. And often your soul's intuition and nudging won't make sense to your mind. Often your soul's intuition and nudging won't make conscious, logical sense because it's arising from beyond logic. Where we start blocking it is we begin to question everything. Why? What does this mean? What does this mean? And so I invite people to stop. One thing that's helped me is to stop trying to make sense of everything. Like, it's kind of counter to what we're taught, make sense of everything. But stop trying to make sense of everything. Turn left. Well, why? And what will happen? And where am I going? Like, you don't need to know. Because even the mechanism that we use to try to interpret this intuition, to try to interpret the guidance, to try to interpret that knowing, the mechanism, which is the mind, is in and of itself conditioned. And so we will often end up making an interpretation about an event, about an intuition that is not accurate, because the filter that we're putting it through is conditioned by the past and pain and trauma and childhood. So often we can convince ourselves that something means whatever we want it to mean, and we can believe ourselves, and it's not true. And so give up the need to try to know and understand what everything means. And when you feel that subtle sense of go here, or something's off, or turn left, pick up the phone, I have found, don't question. Don't question. I don't even question it now. People will say, well, why are you going there? I don't know. Well, why? I have no idea. But here's what I found. You will find out. Surrender. This is why I say surrender is allowing life, not your mind or your ego, but allowing life to show you. Because life has an intelligence. We may not believe it, but it's been around for billions and billions and billions of years. Life has an intelligence. And when we stop questioning, we get ourselves out of the way. Then we start riding the flow. And then if you move in that direction, following your intuition, that's when you start finding like, oh, after the fact, because your mind is not in the way. You know, Bruce Lee talked about be like water.
Yeah.
Be like water, you just flow. But we all want to be like Bruce Lee, but we don't want to flow. You know, we're like, no, I'm going to control. Bruce Lee, he wasn't like a wimp. Bruce Lee was like badass. He was incredible. He said, be like water. You put water into a teacup, it becomes a teacup. You put water into a pot, it becomes a pot. You have to flow. That was the secret to surrender. And so when we flow, you stop questioning. You don't have to understand what something is in order to go. You don't have to know where you're going in order to get to exactly where you need to be. When you truly trust that and you just follow the energy of life, you will be guided. And I just invite everyone to trust that. So for me, what has opened me to my intuition is I stop questioning. When I feel that subtle, now I'm not talking about my mind that's analyzing, turn left, turn right. When I feel that subtle intuition, go here, I don't question. Go there, I don't question. Do this, I don't question. I may not understand it, and it requires an innocence. But in our culture, we've been conditioned to like worship the mind and be intelligent. But you know, I'm going to butcher this quote, okay, because I'm not the best scholar.
Okay.
But it, you know, there's a quote in the Bible that goes something like, in order to enter the kingdom of heaven, you must be like a child, which is innocent. The kingdom of heaven, I take to mean mystically speaking, you know, that state of being, that state of grace, that state of joy, that state of living in bliss right now, not some far off place, you know, that state of just being fulfilled and happy. The kingdom of heaven, in order to be fulfilled within yourself, you must be like a child. And if you look at a child, the child isn't always questioning what's going to happen and why not. It's just being fully, following its curiosity, being fully available. And I think that's the key for me. And I've seen, honestly, and it doesn't mean not being responsible for your life, but when I follow that flow, I've seen magic happen that I could not have even created and manufactured with my own mind, and goals that have manifested that I could not have put on the poster on this poster board. You know, like I bought a piece of land in Joshua Tree. Just like a random example for like go-getters out there that might be like, how is this going to be practical? How does this turn into money? 2015, I felt this nudging to buy some land. I felt nudging to maybe buy some real estate. I looked in LA, I thought real estate is bonkers in LA. Why would I buy anything? And it's just like crazy. And what you get for $1 million is like a shack. It's not even, it's totally uninspiring. So then I thought maybe I'll buy some land. I looked around, one thing led me to the next thing. I'm just poking around, no real like intention, like this is what's gonna happen. I'm just following like something that's nudging me, right? And I end up seeing an architect who had these crazy designs in Joshua Tree. And I called the architect.
Amazing.
No plan. I called the architect and he says, don't buy in LA because it's just too complicated. And then I thought, okay, I'm going to drive out to Joshua Tree. No intention to go there. I went to Joshua Tree. The architect introduces me to his real estate person. The real estate person shows me a bunch of land in Joshua Tree. What the hell am I going to do in Joshua Tree? I'm a city guy. I have no intention of doing anything there. He shows me a bunch of land. I'm like, no. He says, I have 40 acres. Before we go back to the office and you go back to LA, I have 40 acres. 40 acres. I'm like, what the hell am I going to do with 40 acres? But I thought, since I'm here, let me see it. I walk on the land. I feel chills in my body. I'm like, this is the land. I make an offer on the land. I get the land at such a ridiculous, I'm not even going to say what it was. Such a
I know, it's like, I'm curious.
a ridiculous price.
Wow.
Because in 2015, nobody wanted to buy land in Joshua Tree.
Oh, and it's such a hot spot now.
Nobody wanted to buy land.
Wow.
So I end up getting 40 acres. The real estate agent says, you are crazy. No one's going to accept that offer. The guy accepts the offer in 7 days. In 14 days, we close. Boom, wire the money. Before you know it, I'm building on the land. Now, there were all of these crazy delays in building. And I was, pulling my hair out. It was a nightmare, taking 3 years, 4 years, but in that 4-year period of nightmare and delays, Joshua Tree exploded. My architect sends me, true story. Yeah. My architect sends me an article and he says, where you bought your land, Joshua Tree is a big area, but there's a specific pocket in Joshua Tree, the specific little neighborhood where you bought your land is now officially via Zillow, the hottest real estate market in California.
Wow.
the land like 30x, the property, like it's crazy. And so I'm just saying, for the go-getters out there that wonder, like, how is this going to translate into anything other than woo-woo stuff? No. Now the land is worth like a significant amount for a minimal investment. It just goes to show you, sometimes life has its own intelligence.
It's guiding you. Yeah.
And life, I believe that when you follow your soul, you will always end up in the right place at the right time. It just may not take you. You always, this is my guarantee, my surrender guarantee, money back. You will always end up in the right place at the right time. It may not take you, life may not take you on the route that you most expect, but you will end up in the right place at the right time. This is what I can say. And if you think back to your life, how many things turned out that didn't work out, turned out better than you imagined? Just think about how many things that didn't go according to plan turned out better than you imagined. And how many things that you said, well, that actually turned out worse than I imagined in the moment. But now from perspective, looking back, it may have seemed that you got fired and it turned out worse, because someone might say, I surrendered and I got fired. I surrendered and I broke up. I surrendered and I got kicked out. In the moment, it seemed worse. But now looking back, you realize, well, if I didn't get fired, I would not have moved over there. And if I didn't move cities, move countries, I wouldn't have met my soulmate. And so sometimes in the moment, it seems a certain way, but in the grand tapestry of one's destiny and life, the universe is always working for our highest good, even if we can't see it in the moment. So to me, surrender is the key.
I remember so many incidences, one specifically of surrendering when I totally was resistant, but I was almost forced to make a decision. And sometimes when we're forced to make a decision, that's when I think we really have to surrender to not trying to control anything. And it's profound when you reflect back in your life. You could remember these incidences that you went down a path you were very resistant, that you didn't trust, you were very fearful of. But on the flip side, so much growth and evolution, and that's guided you to where you're at now. And it's generally serving you in a bigger purpose and bigger way. So yes, absolutely. That's so amazing. I mean, oh my gosh, I could go on and go on, but I don't know your time. But yes, I mean, I just think it's so important for people to know that our ego, again, our mind, our brain is meant to keep us safe. And usually it's formed, these unconscious beliefs are formed from childhood, and we're so unaware of it because we've suppressed. And the only way we could really reveal this is really being aware and unpacking those layers and asking ourselves these questions. I know you talk about something. I want to, if you could leave us with some homework, if you want to say, because obviously I want people to read the book. And like I said, I've read this book I've read it technically three times.
Wow.
I read it PDF before our interview, and then I digged into it when I was going through the grief, and then I just reread it. Actually, just so you know, I reread this in, again, not full 2 days, but 2 days. I read this in 2 days, highlighted the crap out of it. Again, easy read. And it's like, oh my gosh, you just want to highlight so much because you really speak such volumes through the pages. So anyways, everybody, this is a must read. It's my top recommended read. So just my stamp of approval. But what was I going to say? That so often we try to force things to be a certain way. And you talked about this force versus flow. And I think that's so important for people to know is like, sorry, I got off on the whole, but anyways, I'm going to circle back what I was asking for you to give us homework.
Yeah.
So you say there's something in the book called the truth process.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think this is really important because this is where you really get that deep awareness and really understand, like, what you're tied to and what you need to release so that you can move into the magic.
Yeah, just as maybe a homework assignment for people that I think is really an important, regular, daily, weekly, monthly practice. One of the things that keeps us stuck as human beings, keeps us from surrendering, from going to that next level, from experiencing joy and fulfillment, that I have seen in working with thousands of people from around the world, are all the ways that we lie to ourselves. And as human beings, for the reasons I shared earlier in terms of conditioning, we lie to ourselves. And sometimes we don't even know we're lying to ourselves. Sometimes we're just unconscious that we're lying to ourselves. We've just become a version of ourselves to avoid pain and get love, validation, and approval, that we think that who we are and what we feel and what we believe is what we are, but it's really not. And the degree to which we're conditioned is the degree to which we're not free. We just end up recreating the patterns of the past. And so I think where people can start as a practical, simple homework assignment is asking yourself some questions. Like, we stay in relationships that we know aren't right. We work jobs that we know we're betraying ourselves, that is not in alignment with our true purpose and the reason we were born, and we waste so much time and we wonder why we feel pain inside. To me, pain is a signal that you are not in alignment. Pain is a gift. Pain is feedback. Pain is your friend. And so when you lie to yourself, you feel pain. It's not meant to be that I lie to myself and I feel amazing. No, you lie to yourself and you feel pain. And so here's some questions. Number one, simple questions for homework. What lies am I telling myself? Just feel it. What lies am I telling myself? Simple, but not always easy to do. What lies? And so you have to want the truth more than you want what you want. You have to want freedom more than you want what you have. And when you truly want the truth, if you truly want to be like, freedom isn't free. Freedom requires that you speak and tell the truth. And true happiness is actually easy. Feel the truth, acknowledge the truth, tell the truth, speak the truth, live the truth, happy life. Simple, but not always easy, because we're conditioned. And so what lies am I telling myself? Like, have the courage to start being raw and real and tell yourself the truth, because the truth will set you free. To me, truth is real spirituality. Truth is real spiritual practice, is real meditation, is real yoga. And just be raw and real with yourself. Take the pressure off of yourself of even having to take any action, because sometimes we're so afraid of acknowledging the truth that we feel inside because we're afraid of the consequences. Like, oh shit, if I really acknowledge the truth, I might have to leave my relationship. If I really acknowledge the truth, I might have to leave my job. And because we're afraid of that, we go into this kind of, I don't know, confusion state. Like, I'm confused, I don't know. And so if you take the pressure off of yourself of having to take action, it might mean acknowledging, you know what, I'm not in love anymore. I haven't been in love for 5 years. Or I hate my job. Instead of pretending you like your job, I hate my job. And you don't have to leave, but just feel the resonance of the truth inside and let the truth burn, because that begins a process. You can't change your reality unless you can get into relationship and acceptance of your reality as it is. And truth is part of what helps you get in touch with reality as it is. And when you acknowledge the truth, that's the only way you can truly change the truth. Unless you acknowledge that, okay, I'm in LA, I think you're in LA. Unless we acknowledge, okay, I'm in LA right now, Los Angeles. How do we even navigate where we're going to go if we're BSing ourselves, pretending we're in Utah? You know, it doesn't work. And so truth is key. What lies am I telling myself? A deeper cut of that question is, what am I pretending to not know? What am I pretending to not know? Because we pretend. Sometimes we pretend like, I don't know what my purpose is. I'm not sure what my purpose is, when deep down we know, we have an inkling. We may not know the details, but we have a sense. Sometimes we play this game of confusion so that, like, if I really were to get clear on what my purpose is, then I have a sense about, then I'd have to take action on it. And if I'm confused, then I can always remain in the security and the safety of this confusion, and I don't have to take action. And I can always remain in the future, in the future fantasy and the hope of that future fantasy and safety. And so what am I pretending to not know? Feel that. And lastly, what are the lies that I'm telling myself costing me? Feeling that. Like, what is it costing me? There is a cost and there is a pain. And I'm inviting people to, what we tend to do is we distract from the pain. We busy ourselves from the pain. Don't distract yourself from the pain, because the pain that you feel is likely a gift. It's a sign that you're healthy. right? If you lie to yourself, it's meant to be painful. It's like the alarm goes off in your house and there's a fire. It's a sign that the alarm system is working. And so feel the pain. Let yourself marinate and burn in the pain, and let that begin a process of moving you forward. Feel the pain. Use the pain as an impetus to bring yourself back into alignment. To me, that is key. So what lies am I telling myself? What am I pretending to not know? What is it costing me? And feel that. To me, if you really sit with the truth and you rigorously become a lover of truth, your life will begin to transform.
Wow. Yes. Oh my gosh. So good. Thank you for leaving us with that. So obviously we're probably over time right now, but I wanted to ask you just a couple.
Yes.
Okay. So I always ask my guests a closing question. You answered one of the most profound things last time. I've taken note of it. You might not remember what it is, but I always ask this question. If there was a piece of wisdom that you could leave with us that you feel just anybody needs to hear right now, if you could answer that maybe in a couple sentences, like what is it that wisdom you want to part onto us?
You know, I don't know what I said last time, but it might be similar, if it's okay.
Yeah.
Because it's, at least for me, something that's really important. And it's this theme of like reminding people that you're going to die. And I don't know if that's what I said, but if it was,
and it was the most, it's profound. Go ahead.
Like you are going to die. And just allowing yourself to surrender to that. Like, just so, like, there's no way out of this human experience. Jesus died, Buddha died, Mother Teresa died, Ramana Maharishi died, Gandhi died, Mandela died, Martin Luther King died, Bruce Lee died, you're gonna die, I'm going to die. It's the only guarantee. I'm inviting you to feel your death. I'm inviting you to acknowledge your death. I'm inviting you to surrender to the fact that this physical body will die, and we don't have forever. We don't have forever, and none of us know when that moment will come. The people in 9/11, the people in any sudden disaster had no idea that they weren't going to come home that night and be able to look their loved one in the eyes and say, I'm sorry, and say, I forgive you, say, I really love you. And so if there's something you need to say, if there's something you need to do, if there's someone you need to forgive, don't wait thinking that you have time. Do it now. Feel like, really, as a daily practice, maybe another homework assignment, feel your death, feel the death, feel this reality of death close. Yes, your soul is infinite. We know that, beyond birth, beyond death, but this physical incarnation of you is going to dissolve. Feel your death and use the reality of death as a sobering wake-up call to not waste time. Because when you die and you meet your maker, whatever you believe, you can't go to God and say, can I get a refund on those 5 years I wasted in that relationship? Can I get a refund on those 2 years I wasted in that job I hated? It's gone. And I think the embrace and the acceptance and the surrendering to death frees you up to live life fully, frees you up to embrace how sacred this moment is, how precious this moment is, that tomorrow is not a right. This moment is the only guarantee that we have. And so if death came right now, would you be ready? And if not, why not? What would you need to do? What would you need to say? What would you need to let go of? Do it now. How would you need to live so that if death came, you would have no regrets? The only regret I have in my life was not spending more time with my mother. And when I really felt that, and I really, embraced that, it really inspired me to live each moment with even more fullness and even more love. And there were so many things I wanted to do and so many things I wanted to take her to. And I realized, wow, now it's not possible. And so you're gonna die. Feel that, because it so often we waste so much of our lives on petty shit. We waste so much of our lives worrying about stuff that's not even important. We waste so much of our lives stressing about stuff that we're not even going to care about when that moment comes. And so when you remember death, like, is this how I want to die right now? worrying about this nonsensical issue, thinking about like, how do I want to die, and feel it, and use death not as a morbid thing, but as a sacred reminder to live fully.
I love that message. Yes, you shared that last time, but you even crystallized it even more, the importance of that and why that could be the fuel to really get to you to live every moment fully. Oh my goodness, Kute, like powerful message, everything you shared. Everybody, again, go get Kute's book, Magic of Surrender. This will be in the show notes. Also, he has his paperback releasing in a special free event that he's offering to go with that. Everything will be in the show notes, so we won't go into details. Please check the show notes. Kute, where can people best find you and your offerings?
Yeah, just May the 3rd, the paperback comes out. So people can go to, obviously, Amazon, pre-order the paperback before May the 3rd. The free event is on May the 7th. It's called Reinvent Life. Going to help people reinvent themselves and let go of who they were, connect to their truth, and share their gifts with the world. So once you get the paperback, you get to attend the seminar for free as my guest. Go to www.kuteblackson.com, my name, kuteblackson.com/reinvent seminar. And just enter your name, email, you get free access. Instagram, Kute Blackson, Facebook, Kute Blackson. For those that feel maybe called to go to the next level on a deeper dive, twice a year I do an event in Bali called Boundless Bliss, www.boundlessblissbali.com.
Amazing, Kute. This has been such an honor. So much respect and appreciation for your time and the way you serve in this world. You are a blessing. Thank you so much for everything.